Hello, everyone. We are again with someone that I really love to talk to, Jason Shvili. Welcome.
Thank you for having me again.
Yeah, Jason, you write great articles. You are a great analyst, and you are truly enthusiastic about the well-being of Israel, and you really care not only about the Jews and Israel, but also for the peace in the region. Thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yep, absolutely. And I
yeah.
appreciate the compliments.
Yes, people usually like not everyone, obviously, but people are being distracted or manipulated by thinking that Israel is bringing war to the region, right? Would you want to start by commenting on that? Is Israel bringing war to the region?
Actually, no, but no, Israel's not bringing war to the region. It's actually Israel is actually trying to prevent war. It's I don't know if you've heard the saying, "Pay a little now or pay a lot later." Israel's doing what it's doing so that it and the rest of the region don't have to pay a lot later. It's you're gonna unfortunately, you know, President Trump he tried diplomacy with Iran. It didn't work, and I was pretty sure it wouldn't work. So I think he and Israel were well within their rights to do what they did. Bottom line, Iran would not give up its nuclear weapons program, so Israel and the U.S. had to act.
Okay, so let's start with this. What was Iran doing with the Hezbollah in Lebanon? What's Iran's goal with the Houthis in Yemen?
It's exerting undue influence over what should be a sovereign country. But now Lebanon is not was not a sovereign country, with Hezbollah pulling a lot of the strings there and Iran pulling Hezbollah's strings. So Lebanon basically became an Iranian satellite state. The same thing with Syria. The same. Almost the same with Iraq, and of course in Yemen with the Houthis.
Yeah.
So basically, Iran before the October 7th massacre, Iran was at the height of its power. Basically had proxies all over the Middle East surrounding Israel, and also being a pretty grave danger to its Arab neighbors. For example, I'll just give an example. 6 years ago, the Houthis launched a missile attack on Saudi Arabia and knocked out half of their oil production. Okay, just as one example of how potentially dangerous Iran's proxies can be. And what Israel has done since the October 7th massacre is to basically change the whole equation in the Middle East. Iran is no longer the regional hegemon anymore. Its proxies are laid to waste. Now it no longer. I think we can safely say its nuclear program is set back years, if not decades, and it's a whole new ball game now in the Middle East now because of what Israel's done, and in particular, its Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
Yeah, if we go back to 6th of October, not post 7th of October,
Yeah.
What was okay? Let's say this. We say Iran, but actually we mean the Farsi speakers, right? That compose about half of Iran's population.
Yeah.
So when we say, well, it's a misperception. We say Iran, and we think there's a monolithic identity there. That is not true.
No, absolutely not.
Right. So we are talking about Fars, and I, as a Kurd, I know they are not legitimate in the lands that we call Iran. It was given to them. It was wrong, right? It's a border that creates conflict within itself, right?
Yes,
just
absolutely.
Like Iraq, just like Syria. So let's go back to the Fars, actually, not Iran. What is the legitimacy of the Fars in Lebanon or in Yemen or in Iraq? Do you think there's anything that gives them legitimacy to act politically and mobilize these people against Israel?
The Iranians have no business basically sticking their nose and compromising the sovereignty of these countries. Okay, they have a lot of influence in Iraq. I won't say they control the whole country, but they have a lot of influence there. They control pretty much the government of Yemen. They have control of the capital Sana'a, and the legitimate government in exile is based down on the coast in in Aden. So and in Lebanon, up and before October 7th was basically, and Syria, they were basically satellite states of Iran.
So why some people think that it is wrong for Israel to stop the farce mobilizing some population in Lebanon against Israel? Why shouldn't Israel do that?
Well, because a lot of people think that Israel doesn't belong there. They think that Jews don't belong there, that Israel is a colonial settler state, and that's the narrative that a lot of people on college and university campuses around the world hear. That's the narrative you hear in media to some extent, and unfortunately, all of it is untrue.
But the same people also do not recognize the legitimacy of the Kurds on their own land. Look, they say, okay, the farce can go way beyond their geography, arm the people in Lebanon, arm the people in Iraq, Syria, Yemen, mobilize them against whatever their ideology is. Ideology gives them legitimacy. They can do that. But you know what? We cannot talk about the Kurds. How can you not see the Kurds but try to see anything else in the Middle East? What do you think about that?
You know what? I wish I had an answer. I really wish I had a good answer for that. I don't. Unfortunately, the Kurds are a neglected and persecuted people, just like several persecuted people around the world. If you talk about the Uyghurs in northwestern China, or the Rohingya in Burma, the Tuaregs in West Africa, and the list goes on and on. It's basically a very neglected group of people that a lot of people don't listen to, and unfortunately, even after World War I, people didn't listen to the Kurds. We had the opportunity after World War I to create a Kurdish state, but instead, the Western powers decided that the Kurds were going to be incorporated into these artificial borders that they made, and they basically allowed the Turks under the reign of Ataturk to reconquer what is now southeastern Turkey and most of Kurdistan.
Yeah. So, what would you say of that? People say Israel is an oppressing regime, right? Are there any people that are not recognized with their faith or linguistics within Israel?
Not at all. Not at all.
In Turkey, there are.
Oh,
in
yes,
Iran,
absolutely.
there are. In Iraq, there was. In Syria, there was. Why isn't the priority of these people to go after these four regimes, or more even, but they go only after Israel? How does it make sense to them? Are they objective?
No, they're not objective at all. They're basically what motivates them is basically plain old-fashioned anti-Semitism. Now they'll call it a lot of people will say, well, we're anti-Zionist, we're not anti-Semitic. Well, that's a load of garbage, to be quite frank, because basically when you say you're anti-Zionist, you're saying that let's briefly define Zionism for a moment. It's the movement to create and maintain a Jewish homeland in the indigenous Jewish homeland of what we call Eretz Yisrael, or the land of Israel. So if you're against Zionism, you're basically against Jewish self-determination. And
that very much sounds like replace the word Jew with Kurd, replace the land of Israel with the land of Kurdistan. That's very much what I want for my people. I see nothing wrong with that.
And I would certainly say that if you're against a Kurdish state emerging, you're anti-Kurdish.
Yeah. So these people, they basically defend the colonial borders, nothing else, with a flavor of anti-Zionism, or maybe it's the other way around. They are justifying their anti-Zionism by defending the current borders. Like they both are wrong. Like one false argument is defended with another false argument.
Absolutely. I just wanted to get into we talked about this.
I'm going to come to that. I'm going to come to that. So one more question about the current conflict, right? So what does, like, my question is that I'll ask the question with an answer, if you will. To my knowledge, Israel doesn't want any land from what we call Iran. Israel has
No,
no interest in any gold or gas or
no,
whatever riches that we
no,
think. Israel has no interest whatsoever on
no.
this land, right? So then why is Israel is simply a like, there should always be a reason for war, right? If you are attacking someone, if you are on the offense, well, if you don't want anything from these people, then what do you want? Well, it sounds to me like Israel only wants peace.
That's correct. All we want is peace. Every time, in fact, it's interesting. Every time historically, when Israel wins a war, the first thing it does is sue for peace. All right, we won our independence war in 1948. We wanted peace. We even offered to take back some of the people, some of the Palestinians who left what became Israel. The Arabs said flat out no. And after our victory in 1967, we again said we are willing to exchange the land that we took in exchange for peace. Again, the Arabs said no. In fact, they responded with the infamous 3 no's resolution in Khartoum, Sudan. No peace with Israel, no diplomatic relations, no talking to Israel whatsoever, basically. And
So, yep, go ahead, please.
now we're basically, we're still saying we've to the Palestinians, we've offered them, within the space of a decade, in the 2000s, we offered them a peace. We offered them a peace on their own, a country of their own, three times, and they said no each time. And after we tried offering them in 2000 and 2001 a country of their own, which would have included pretty much the entire, almost all of Judea and Samaria, or the West Bank, as a lot of people like to call it, and the Gaza Strip, and a capital in East Jerusalem. And they said no. And later in 2000, and of course later in 2000, the Second Intifada. So we came with them with a peace offering. They responded with more terrorism.
Yeah. So if I may make a comment, obviously I'm not from Israel. I am not an Arab, and I'm not particularly Arab from the lands of Israel and Palestine, right?
Yeah.
But I believe eventually peace is going to reign. There is going to be peace between the peoples. It's just people need to sit together, understand each other's fears, understand each other's wants, and settle down.
Yes, absolutely. And it will. And it will happen. It will happen. You know what? 100. You know what? This is hardly our feud. Our sort of this sort of family feud that's been going on between Jews and Arabs, who are basically cousins. It's not a long feud. It's been going on for, if you want to stretch it back to after World War I. It's been only going on for about a century.
Yeah. What people don't understand is, if you are a Jew in Israel, and I have had friends, you don't want to live that life, that you're constantly under fear of being attacked. What an Israeli Jew doesn't want is to live under the constant threat of an attack by people around you.
That's correct.
So if that was understood, I think first this has to be understood. Jews escaped genocide. It is their ancestral homeland. That is true, but it's also the last refuge. Jews will defend their homeland because that's their survival.
That's right.
Other people should understand that fear. And it's not based on nothing. It's based on reality. This attack is continuous. It's imminent. It's always there.
Yep.
So but again, I am not from there. It's for the people that live there to find their peace. They have to talk, right? So when we come to Mr. Erdogan, right?
Yeah.
Erdogan has. Would you want to make your entry of that?
Well, Erdogan last week at the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, he was at a sort of a summit of the organization, and he basically said that Netanyahu is the biggest obstacle to regional peace. He also condemned Israel's actions in Iran to prevent Iran from attaining a nuclear weapon. And he also accused Israel of beginning those actions in order to sabotage negotiations between the U.S. and Iran for Iran to give up their nuclear program. Both of these accusations are adamantly false. In fact, Netanyahu has done more for peace in the Middle East than maybe anybody in the last couple of generations has. Meanwhile, Erdogan is also a hypocrite because if anybody other than Iran is an impediment to Middle East peace, it's him and the revived Ottoman Empire that he's trying to create.
Yeah, like following the Turkish politics, Turks want 3 cities in the Middle East. Turks want Aleppo.
Yep.
Turks want Mosul. Turks want Damascus.
That's right.
They don't want these cities to be free. They want these cities to be ruled by Ankara. How is that peace?
That's not peace. And you know what? It's funny because President Erdogan said that he said Turkey would not allow the borders of the Middle East to redrawn, and I quote him, in blood.
What is he doing in Cyprus? What is he doing in northern Syria?
Yeah,
what is he doing in northern Iraq?
That's right. He's trying to redraw the borders in blood. And how much Kurdish blood does he have on his hands?
Hundreds of thousands, I can say.
Yeah, absolutely.
5 Kurdish cities were demolished to the level of Gaza. Have you ever heard of it on any news?
No, you know what? No, you have to look really deep to find that information. And the reason you don't find that information is, you know what? If Jews had slaughtered the Kurds, you would definitely hear about it.
So isn't it interesting that I'm repeating myself, but it's the hypocrisy of the people who criticize Israel. Israel is there based on a legitimate threat defense.
That's correct.
But when you look at Turkey, it's in an aggressive, offensive expansion, and nobody talks about it. Yeah. Turkey has self-rule in northern Syria. Turkey appoints governors from Turkey. It's Turkish lira that's being used as currency. Yeah. Turkey decides for the curriculum. Turkey appoints the teachers. Turkey does the infrastructure. It's the Turkish telecom, Turkish banks, and has more than 200 military outposts in northern Iraq, effectively controls since 1974 northern Cyprus, openly declares that they want Mosul, they want Aleppo, they want Damascus, and they openly declare even today that it's time for annihilation of Israel.
Yes, absolutely. And Erdogan has clearly said in the past that he wants the annihilation of Israel, and he's even threatened to go to war with Israel to seek its annihilation.
So if Israel was to stop Turkey from if Israel was to stop Turkey, has nothing to do with Kurds. Just because Erdogan and his political affiliates openly declare it's time to annihilate Israel, how will Israel be called the aggressor?
Israel's certainly not the aggressor. No, if we said we were going to annihilate the Turks or anyone else, we would be called genocidal maniacs. But the Turks have been systematically slaughtering and persecuting Kurds for generations, and nobody says anything about that.
Actually, worse. Every Kurdish child is being taught that they are Turks every single morning. Tell me a worse genocide than that. Because when the Nazis were killing the Jewish, they were killed because they were Jewish.
That's correct. Yep.
Right? Turks capture Kurdish children every morning in schools, and they teach them that they are Turkish.
Yep.
There is not a single Kurdish language school in all of Turkey, despite the average 20 million Kurdish population there. How is Turkey for peace? How is this not the biggest conflict ever, that you deny the very existence of 20 million people and you kidnap their children, you kill the Kurd inside the Kurd?
Yeah,
Does Israel
absolutely.
do that?
And here in Canada, it's interesting you say you killed the Kurd inside the Kurd. Well, you know what? That's not too dissimilar to what many Canadians here in Canada are familiar with, the residential school system that was designed to kill the Indian and the child. That was the saying. So it's basically the same thing.
But how the people can see what happens to the First Nations in Canada, but not see the Kurds in Turkey, but shout out loud for the Arabs in Gaza, which is basically a conflict between two peoples, far from everyone.
No, yeah, basically, you know what? No Jews, no news.
I like that one. It's actually true, right?
That's the truth. People would, if the Jews were doing these things to the Kurds, people would care about the Kurds. You know what? So, it's a very, very harsh miscarriage of justice.
Yeah. So when I look at Israel's map and the region's map, I'm now almost 50 years old, and when I was growing, the prominent Kurds would say, and there were too few way then, we have more prominent Kurds today, they would say the future of Kurdistan is tied to the future of Israel. The true ally of the Kurds are the Israelis, are the Jewish. And growing as a Kurd, I can assure you, I've never even heard the slightest anti-Jewish or anti-Zionist comment. Not anti-Zionist, I would say, but there was always a how to say, that there wouldn't be any specific talk about the Jews. They're just people.
No.
For the Kurdish people.
Yes, absolutely. I know. Well, you know what? Persecuted minorities in the Middle East, like Jews, like Kurds, like Azeris, or the Arabs in southwestern, yes, in Ahwaz or Ahvaz, yes, whatever it's called, and Christians in the Middle East. All we have in terms of allies a lot of times is each other.
Yeah.
We've got. I'd say Israel could be a very, very inspirational story for the other minorities in the Middle East, because
I know for Kurds, we are fascinated by the story of the state of Israel, how it was conceived, how it was planned, how it was executed, and how it's defended today. It's a true inspiration for all the Kurdish people.
Yep.
Here's my question. Israel is alone in the region, not because of its borders, but because of the borders of the others. Baghdad has no legitimacy to rule the Shia in the south or the Kurds in the north. Damascus had never legitimacy to rule the Badawi Arabs in the east of the country, or because Arabs are not a solidified monolithic group, right?
No.
There are different types of Arabs, and Syria has at least three different types of Arabs, plus the Druze, plus the Kurds. Damascus had never legitimacy. Ankara has no legitimacy in its northeast, where the different ethnicities live that people don't know, but definitely has no legitimacy in Kurdistan. And we talked about Iran. So these borders leave Israel alone. If Israel wants to be many in the sense that there are just borders, there are peace promoting borders instead of the blood borders that we have. The Middle East has to be redesigned, not for Israel, just based on the facts on the ground. A Kurdistan for Kurds.
Yes, absolutely. And let me just bring you back in after World War I, when the Allies defeated the Ottoman Empire, the German and Austro-Hungarian empires. They made a decision in Europe that there were going to be no more multinational empires. So they broke the Austro-Hungarian Empire, in particular, into nation states based on ethnicity. So there was no multinational empire. So they created Hungary, Austria, etc., and no more artificial imperial borders. They didn't do that in the Middle East. They were content to create borders in the Middle East that suited them, not the peoples of the Middle East. So they created Syria, Iraq, Jordan, Lebanon, and so forth. And they also created, of course, the British Mandate of Palestine, which actually unlike most of the other country artificial borders that were created, corresponds roughly with the borders of the historical Jewish homeland.
So let me tell you something. I'm not, maybe you know, maybe you don't know, because most people don't know. Actually, when we say Persian, that is not the Fars of Iran.
No,
The
Persia, up until the early 20th century, Iran was called Persia. And I'm not sure which ruler decided to change the name. He actually, believe it or not, the story I've heard is that the ruler of the time changed the name of the country to Iran because he wanted it to be more
Actually, that's also not true.
Oh, really?
May I say? Yeah, because before what we call Iran today, it was ruled by a dynasty called the Qajars. Before the Qajars, it was a Safavid.
Yeah.
And before the Safavid, actually, now that's the interesting part. The language that when we speak English, we say Persian. When you go to the local, it's called Farsi.
That's correct.
Farsi is an immigrant language from Afghanistan today. It's not autochthon. It's not the antiquity language there. So we look back at history, we say there is the old Persian, the language of the Persians of the past, and then we call there is the language of the Sassanid. But then they call them Middle Persian. So as if there's a continuity between the old Persian, Middle Persian, and the Persian of today, which is Farsi. That is wrong. Both Old Persian and Middle Persian were Northwestern Iranian languages, which Farsi is not. When you say Northwestern Iranian languages, these are the Kurdish languages. So we are giving the Kurdish history to the Fars, which is a farce in itself.
Yeah.
Right? So okay. So anyway, I don't know why I got into that. But here's my last question. It's going to help Israel. Oh no, I remember why I said that. Because when you look at the Old Testament, when you read the exile in Babylon, the book writes that it was the law of the Medes and the Persians that ended the Babylonian exile. That was the ancestor of the Kurds, of my people, not the Fars today, because they are immigrants from Afghanistan.
Yes, I learned that only very recently. Yeah. And in the history, and if you read the history books, it says that Cyrus, the king of Persia, freed the Jews from the Babylonian exile. It doesn't say Kurds. It doesn't say Medes. It says
because they were Pers. They were Pers, just like you would say, like the Kurds today. We have the Kurmanj, we have Soran, we have Zaza, we have Pahlavi. It was one of them, but they were not related with the Fars today. The Fars today that people call Persian are from Afghanistan. They have nothing to do with history of our people, right? So when I say, if that is true, if the recorded history in the book is true, if it was the Medes, the law of the Medes that were the ancestors, one of the ancestors of the Kurds that saved the Israelis in the past.
Well, then the history book should, if that's the case, the history book should say that, because right now they don't say that.
Yeah.
So they say the Persians did it.
Yeah, Persians did it, but the Persians were not the Fars. Persians were a different people. Their descendants are us, Northwestern Iranian language-speaking Kurds. But the thing is that if Israel was to help the Kurds today, that's a payback. I love it. I accept it.
Yeah, that would be it would make perfect sense. I should also tell you that you go back far enough in Turkey, what's now Turkey today. You go back far enough, there was not one Turk in that area. The Turks came from Central Asia and migrated into what's now Turkey. Turkey was not Turkish a long time ago. Yeah. A long time ago, it was very different.
Yeah. True. So one last question. Turkey has no legitimacy in Syria. Turkey is an occupying force.
That's right.
Just like Turkey has no legitimacy on some parts of what we call Turkey.
That's correct.
Is not legitimate on its own land.
Yeah.
But the Kurds are legitimate people, just like the Jews in Israel.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? Would you support Israel to give a hand to Kurds to gain their own sovereignty on their own land, at least in Syria and Iraq?
Absolutely, I would. Absolutely.
Why would you say that? Why?
Why? Because the Kurds have always been an ally of Israel, and Israel can't pick and choose its friends, okay? And the Kurds have been a very loyal friend to to Israel. Number two, it's, it basically makes, when we help the Kurds, we help ourselves, because the more territory and the more influence the Kurdish people can have, the rise of a Kurdish state for the first time in history would be a godsend for Israel, because it would mean we have a strong ally in the heart of the Middle East, which right now we don't really have.
Yeah, here's how I see with my people, or let me say like that. Every Jewish person I met in my life, in different countries, I've been to 4 continents, 12 countries I lived in. Any Jewish person I met, they have a true sympathy, heartfelt sympathy for the Kurds. They feel for the Kurds. When I talk to my people, the Kurdish people, it's more transactional. They are after an interest from the state of Israel. They think they can benefit. What I believe is Israel can do a little bit more to gain the hearts of Kurdish people. It will help Israel, because right now Kurds are looking at it transactional.
Yep, absolutely.
But I believe there can be real connection between the two peoples. We're both very ancient natives of this land.
Absolutely, yes.
Both the Jews and the Kurds are the 2 most ancient people of this land. This is our land.
Absolutely.
Our peace are the pillars that will bring peace to the land.
Yeah, I'm not even sure. Now, I know that Jewish people in what's now Israel, we date back 3,000 years. Okay. I don't know. Personally, forgive my ignorance. I don't know how long way back the Kurds trace their ancestry in the Middle East. Maybe as long as the Jews, maybe longer. Okay, but we know that the majority population in the Middle East right now, or at least the Fertile Crescent area, is Arab. But the Arab legacy in the Middle East is only about 1,400 years old.
They are also immigrants.
Yes, absolutely, they are. And
here's the thing.
That's the funny thing. The Palestinians always say, "Well, we're the original people of this land," but the Palestinians, to their own admission, say they're Arabs. Where do Arabs come from? They come from the Arabian Peninsula. They don't come from the Levant or North Africa. And if you want to talk about an occupation, well, there's been a very large occupation going on for the last 14 or so 100 years.
Isn't this right?
Occupation of North Africa and the Middle East.
That Max Planck Institute, Kurds speak an Indo-European language, right?
Yeah, that's
Kurdish
right.
is an Indo-European language.
Yeah.
Max Planck Institute in July 2023 published an article, a scientific article, after a report of their scientific study, let's say. They say they have determined the original land of Indo-European languages.
Yeah.
If you look at the map, they have clouded what we call Kurdistan, but there's no mention of Kurdistan. I contacted the head scientist of the project. I asked, I said, this is very interesting article. I'm Kurd, and I believe Kurds have contributed a lot to the history, but they are never mentioned. I see your article. You have clouded my land, but there's no mention of it. So I said, can I ask you to name the place? And second, can you send me the whole article? He replied back, Paul Hegarty, and in his reply, he said, yeah, that was asked by the journalist to him to name the place. He said it wouldn't correspond to any modern state's borders, but to the lands where Kurdish is spoken today. So the way you said, no news, no juice. When it comes to Kurds, it's like an illusion. Kurds don't exist. Kurds don't exist. Like, they cannot name the Kurds. For God's sake, Kurds are there. Kurdistan is there. Kurdish language is there. Why don't you say the origin of Indo-European culture, Indo-European peoples, and Indo-European languages is Kurdistan today? There is a people living there.
If people are going to start, there are probably millions of people, especially in the Western world, that don't even know the Kurds exist. Okay, and what? It's hard to. The big thing that, if you have a country, then you exist. If you don't have a country, you're not on the map. It's like you're not even there.
Yeah. So that's when it comes, and I say, God bless Israel.
Yeah.
God protect Israel, because without Israel, Kurds have no future whatsoever in that region with our 40 million population. God bless Israel. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And the same protection I wish for the Kurds now and in the future.